Okay, good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to our learning community this morning, whether you're in your work office, your home office, or maybe even on your back patio. I'm Sally Durstine, and I lead our team here at the Family Business Center. And I'm really excited about our program this morning, which is focusing on the shareholder mountain. And I'm also excited about the idea and the prospect of moving more towards in-person and probably hybrid programs where we have in-person and virtual programs. So Karen will be sending out a survey, and we'd really like your response to that. We want to hear your thoughts on all of that, which is very important to us. So I'd like to first start about our theme. Our theme continues on accountability, which is so important, especially given the complexity of family businesses. And if you've already read the book that we sent to you on the ideal team player, you will have already read about the 3 attributes of ideal team players, which are humble, hungry, and people smart. And these traits drive the highest levels of team accountability and performance. So this year, we're continuing to learn how members are recruiting, selecting, and nurturing ideal teams in each of their mountains. I'd like to express gratitude for our educational sponsors who contribute their experience and expertise to all of our programs, as well as to the health of many of your businesses. And just a logistical note, if you have questions throughout the morning, we do welcome them. Click on the Q&A button, which is likely going to be at the bottom of your screen. You can type in your questions, and we will probably hold them towards the end. And also, members, you will receive or have access to this program and to the slides afterward. So I like to be purposeful in everything I do, and I like to start with our mission. Our mission is all about guiding business families so they flourish as individuals, as families, and as businesses. So we're about thriving, not just surviving. And as you know, this is the world that you live in, lots of complexity, a lot of overlapping roles, relationships, responsibilities, and needs. So there's really a lot of opportunity for built-in confusion and conflict. So a key part of our work is to pull these roles apart, because as we've learned that families that are successful through the generations really get good at developing 5 different teams, which are also 5 different structures. So we want to bring a lot of clarity to who's doing what in what team, especially since you're on so many teams, and then how we can really delve into crucial conversations that help us to flourish. So I'm really excited about hearing from a 3rd generation shareholder and a 5th generation shareholder. In February, we focused on the family mountain, but I'd like to start today's program focusing on really the different forms of ownership. There are 3 different forms. Now, these stages may evolve with the generation. So it may go from a controlling owner or the founder to the 2nd generation, a sibling partnership, and then the 3rd generation, a cousin consortium, or they may recycle, may go controlling owner, maybe sibling partnership. In fact, I'm aware at least 2 families that are participating today are sibling partnerships, but they're in the 4th generation. So these are very different ownership structures. In the controlling owner, think founder. They're really king of all the mountains. They often lead the family, they lead the company, they're the only shareholder. They can have a board meeting in the shower and change their mind every 2 minutes. That is very different than a sibling partnership, where we need to share leadership. We need to share decision-making and collaboration, and which is very different than the cousin consortium, where it gets so much more complex. We need more written policies, more structure, more clarity. So while each stage has predictable dynamics and deserve appropriate governance policies, we're not going to talk more about that today. Instead, I encourage you to either reach out and talk to me or pick up Succeeding Generations, the book by Yvonne Landsberg. We really agree with his philosophy. So since today's presenters are in the cousin stage, And since many of you joining us today are either in the controlling ownership stage or a sibling partnership, I'd like this to be relevant for you as well. So I'd like to take a look at some of the transitions between ownership stages. So this table, if you'll note on the left-hand side, it starts with the controlling owner at the bottom and goes upward. And then across the top, I put choice, risk, and accountability. So let's first of all take a look at the controlling owner. Is there a choice? Well, I would say yes, a full choice. Often they're successful in another career or maybe not. They just want to have an idea and they want to go for it. So usually a full choice. I'm going to start this business. And then what about a risk, the financial risk? Often it's pretty high, especially if there's a capital intensive business involved. What about the emotional and relational risk? I would say this is medium because often founders are driven by high autonomy needs. So there's this sense of freedom. What about accountability? Often they're accountable to themselves, unless of course there were lenders involved, often family members, and then of course being accountable to their spouse. Marriage relationships are very important. So let's take a look as we move to the sibling partnership stage. This is very different. What about a choice? I would say often this is muted. There's often, whose dream is this anyway? Is this dad's dream, mom's dream? Or is this truly our dream? Or, is this an arranged marriage? What about risk? Well, financially, often there's a successful operating business already in place. Often the shares are discounted or even gifted, so it's pretty low. What about risk emotionally and relationally? Many next generation members are often seduced into the business by either opportunity, by legacy, loyalty, money, the financial implications, or even expectations. And it's often hard to figure out, who am I in this? And how can I contribute? There's all kinds of sibling sensitivities. Can we collaborate? There's sibling rivalry, all of that we're not going to go into right now. But then as far as accountability, often initially they're accountable to the parents. There might be a financial gift, there might be some payback, but often, especially if there's gifting, there's kind of an emotional obligation, and that creates some dynamics. So you can see very different between controlling owner and sibling partnership. So I'm going to give this a red danger sign because this is often a dangerous transition zone. It's pretty hard often because it's first time in transition, often for the founders and for the senior generation. So just a quick word about the cousin consortium, which we're going to hear about today. Where's choice here? How is that? Often, or many times, we're born shareholders. So that's pretty low. The risk financially, often that's pretty low as well. There's often a very profitable business, often gifted. How about the emotional relational risk? I'd say low here as well. And often this is where some of our concerns come in around entitlement or dependency. Hopefully there's continues to be pride and loyalty, but where does all that fit in? And then accountability is often fairly low here as well. So in summary, very different forms of ownership, and you can see that choice, risk, and accountability are different as well. So speaking of siblings, my daughter sent this photo earlier this week, and she had a caption, "Sibling love." And I thought, oh, isn't that darling? And then I remembered, this was another picture. Now, pictures, they speak 1,000 words. This is just a hint of the wide range of emotions between siblings. And in the family, which, if not understood as adults, can really go underground and may play out in the business. And we don't have time today to delve into the impact of the family emotional system. But I'd just like to say that the soft stuff, the so-called soft stuff, is really the hard stuff in family business, which is why our work with you is always addressing the family and the business issues, kind of what's at the intersection. So just a word here about the slippery, seductive slopes of sibling partnerships. Beware of them. There are strong internal and external forces which move family businesses to a sibling partnership, sometimes prematurely. So let's take a look at some of these slippery slope items. First of all, with the senior generation, who've spent often a lifetime working, sacrificing, and they might wonder, why not my kids? Maybe I wasn't always there for my kids as a parent. The business is often the barking dog. So, I'd like this business to continue. I want the kids to benefit from some of my hard sacrifice. And I want to transfer maximum wealth with minimal taxes. It sounds reasonable, doesn't it? And pretty common. So they may go to their advisors, help me with this, especially with all this taxes. I mean, we all want to save taxes, but what sometimes happens is we get confused about estate planning and wealth transfer, and that gets intermingled with ownership planning. And especially because often the assets and the wealth are tied up into the business. There's not much diversification. And so sometimes we create business partnerships for our kids, and they can be trapped. So let's just take a little look at the rising generation slippery slope. And here there's often an opportunity to contribute, sometimes pretty quickly, and to gain some financial security, which is often why we suggest, let's get some outside experience here first. Let's figure out who you are. A big part of growing up is differentiating. Who am I apart from my parents, apart from my family? So there's a danger that the children, the adults, will never grow up and find their voice. And I'd also just like to add, we're often emotional owners first, children in a family business. I know this with my own family business growing up. My dad would take me out on sales calls, and I'd love it. The customers would love it. And it was just a warm, fuzzy feeling. I got to be with my dad and maybe sometime join the business. So lastly, siblings seldom make optimal business partners. I'll just say, check the Bible on this. I won't say more on that, but we know the story about Cain and Abel and Jacob and Esau. So do these conditions lead to strong, durable partnerships? So one of the big questions is, how can the family factor be a competitive advantage rather than a complete drag? So just a word, too much of our work is unraveling inappropriate or unaligned business partnerships, but we also like to get in there early and help families make good decisions. So while there's no secret recipe, because every family and every business is different, we have found that these 5 principles guide an intergenerational process. And note, it is not senior driven. We believe the rising generation should do the heavy lifting. The rising generation should earn the trust, figure out if they have complementary skill sets, if they can speak straight to each other, if they can create proposals that the rising generation or that the senior generation can approve. So for them to really come together and create a shareholder covenant so they can speak with one voice. Yes, shareholder agreements are very important, but that's really more kind of the divorce document. How do we get out of this gracefully and into it, but not so much, how are we going to make this work? So, and then the second principle, the senior generation has to figure out how to let go. What's their next chapter? So that's a delicate dance. Third principle, all family members count. We see spouses as resources. While they're not involved in all the decisions, I think they deserve to be educated and at least have a place for their voice. And then the fourth, the best counsel is collaborative. Let's have our advisors working collaboratively. And that's what we do. We bring them together so they're not in silos. And lastly, both generations seeking the common good. We're really all about common good for the family, for the individuals, and for the business. So our 2 presenters have moved through this delicate sibling partnership to the cousin stage, which has its own opportunities and complexities. So I'd like to start with Nellie. And Nellie, Oops, sorry. Make sure I get the right slide up here. Nellie, welcome first of all to you.
Thank you, Sally. Good to be here.
And I'd like if you could give us a context of your family business, a little bit about your family, about the business, and maybe about your mountainscape.
Sure, sounds good. Well, the next slide is a picture of almost all of us taken 2 years ago at a Christmas event at my Aunt Mary Ellen's house. You can see the G2 is 6 siblings, including my dad. And then I have about 18 cousins, 17 plus me is 18. And then our spouses, our significant others are here too, along with our children, which are the grandchildren. And then this is a graph of all the people you just saw in that picture. And I'm sure everybody here is kind of familiar. You probably have your own family tree from Del Val. In pink, I highlighted my family. My dad is Ed Forst, and then I have 3 siblings down there. I am divorced, but we all have kids. They're all married, and you see my dad is on his 2nd marriage with my stepmom and her daughter Mara. So we really try to stay a unit amongst units, if you will. And then this is about Lincoln. Sally, should I talk about Lincoln now?
Sure, unless you have anything else you want to say about the family first, Nellie? No?
Oh, I should mention which ones of us work at Lincoln. Well, first of all, my grandfather and my grandmother, Nick and Agnes, started the business and worked all the way through. My dad and all of his siblings have worked for the business. 3 of them are now retired. And then in my generation, it is a lot of us have worked at Lincoln at some point, either as interns or part-time or full-time employees. Right now, the full-time employees are myself, Eric Forst, and his sister-in-law, Dinah. And, like I said, my sister Samantha worked there for a long time. My cousin Brian works for Uncle Harry right now. Uncle Harry has 2 children also in the business. So we're trying to make it work.
And you can see, look at all this complexity here. So these colors match up with our mountains. So you can see all those in blue, as Nellie said, are in the business. Everybody's red because they're all family members count. There's a lot of gold. And just a word about Nellie's grandpa. He presented to our forum probably, 25 years ago, Nick. Quite a character. And also Nellie's father, Ed, would have presented last year. So quite a family.
And then Lincoln. So what is all this about? Who are we? Lincoln Investment was started in 1968. So we're on our 52nd year now. What you're seeing is the front page of our website, lincolninvestment.com. Over the years, through a lot of work by G1 and G2, we now have over 1,000 advisors that work with us as their broker dealer. Those reps have over 350,000 clients, and Lincoln employs over 400 people. We have our headquarters in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania. We have an office down in Florida. We had an office in Cincinnati. So, and now, well, everybody's working at home. So that's a COVID symptom. I mean, honestly, it's not bad, but it's definitely caused by COVID. We have $42 billion in assets. And at Lincoln, we try to treat our client relationships as the most important, and we consider our advisors and their clients to be our clients. And in the past 11 years, we were voted a top workplace in the Philadelphia area. And we are very proud of that. And that shows how much work our human resources department does. So I appreciate
Excellent.
that.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the mountains. These are the traditional Delaware Valley Family Business Center mountains +1. I added the Force Foundation because that is our charitable branch, and it is a very important piece of Nick and Agnes's founding philosophy. So it had to be in there. My Aunt Mary Ellen was handling it for a long time, and now my cousin Kelly Miller handles the Force Foundation with some advising from Uncle Harry, I believe, and Rosemary. So, and we all try to contribute as much as we can. Management, there's the 5 people who are in management. Let's see, family council. This is a Del Val thing. Del Val encouraged us to create a family council. And now Julie, it leads the way. I'm the treasurer, and we meet at least once a quarter to plan things like family reunions and to prepare for our biannual, that means twice a year, right? Biannual. Shareholder meetings, which is all the Force family shareholders. That's 24 people. We have meetings twice a year to make sure that everybody is educated on the business and aware of what's going on, even if they're not directly involved. Did I miss anything, Sally?
That's good. And you want to talk later about the Liggy board and the Leach board? We'll do that later.
Right. Just to say that the Liggy board is the family board. And right now it's G2, and Julie, Eric, and I are observing and helping out with that. And then the Lich board is the business board. It is the real thing. It's not just G2, 3 people in G2. It's also business partners and CFOs and things like that.
And who is the president, by the way?
The CEO of Lincoln Investment is my father, Ed Forst.
Yeah, so that has some other unique dynamics there.
That's right. He's done a very, very good job of expanding our Lincoln Investment and keeping it independent. All right, here's our structure. This whole presentation is about being a shareholder at a family business. So as you can see, I marked our family in red at the top. We used to own 100% of the company, but in order to get a little liquidity into our lives and for retirement purposes, etc., we now own 71% of the company, and our title is Lincoln Investment Group Holdings Inc., which we call Liggy. And then the other shareholders filter down into Lich, which is Lincoln Investment Capital Holdings. And I just marked Lincoln Investment in red as well, because that is what we're really talking about. The other ones are, that we won't be talking about them today. They're additions and things like that. And then, so we have a timeline. I skipped from 1975 to 2009. And I really just want to talk about the past 2 years, because in 2018, we celebrated our 50 years. It's a really big accomplishment for family businesses. Mm-hmm. And we had a company picnic, which we used to do when we were much smaller, and it was a great time. We're really proud of that, and we hope to continue that maybe every 5 years going forward. And that's about it for our timeline and the Constitution that Del Val also helped us create. Actually, G2 had a Constitution since maybe the early 90s, but we just updated it 2 years ago. You can see our mission statement there. And visually, it's much easier to just remember that our grandparents' philosophy was to help people have fun and make money, because making money help people have fun. So charity is a lot of it. And, you know, having a business that employs people creates stability for a lot of families in the world. And that's important to us.
Well said.
All right, so more about charity. There's our Force Foundation logo. And about 2 years ago, my Aunt Karen, who has worked at Lincoln forever, and she really helps perpetuate the culture of Lincoln. We have always had like charitable Fridays, or what are they called? Casual Fridays, where if you contribute something to the charity of the week, you get to wear jeans. So
Nice.
2 years ago, we made it a lot more official, and we called it Lincoln Cares, and Lincoln Cares has its own website that you can see here. We have a group of about 20 employees that really make sure that charity is a focus of our business and not just sort of a reason to wear jeans, if you will. I'm really proud of this. I'm really proud of my Aunt Karen. Eric is involved too. We have every other Friday is still a casual Friday, but in addition to that, 4 times a year, we have events that employees actually get involved in. They might take a half day or something to educate for financial literacy, or to relieve hunger, or to sustain the environment. And also mental health and recovery is very important to our family. So that's our fourth ideal, if you will, our fourth focus for Lincoln Cares.
I just love how you have that Lincoln Cares, how the acronyms. And I get to hear some of this from Nellie. She's also in our Women in Family Business Peer Group. So I get to hear some of how much their values are really infiltrated through the company and then outward.
And also, I should mention that one of the main functions of the Force Foundation is to encourage our reps and employees to donate to charities and then have us match the donation. And that's really our driving force with the Force Foundation.
Awesome.
And then this is my last slide. This is just a little about me outside of Lincoln and my family. I'm a mother. I'm a council member on Ambler Borough Council. My job at Lincoln is virtual service coordinator. So we are basically virtual assistants to our reps. And now that COVID has made our reps much more comfortable with virtual things, we are getting much more popular. I'm a pet owner and a gardener, and this is gardening season. And this is my website. I'm up for re-election. So if you live in a tiny section of Ambler Borough, Ward 3, please vote for me.
Love it. And I just love, Nellie, how your whole identity isn't the business. I love that. That's so healthy, how you're just laying this all out. Thank you,
Thank you,
Nellie.
Sally.
Well, so now Tara, same thing for you. I'd like if you could give an overview kind of the family business. And I might add that we have been privileged as a learning community hear from others from the Clemens family. We've heard from Phil in the past, from Doug Clemens. We've heard from John Reininger. And so today we get to hear from Tara. Welcome, Tara.
Okay. Thank you, Sally. So I will go ahead and I'm going to start, let's go through the different names first, and I'll start right off with the mountains. The corporate name is the Clemens Family Corporation. In the area, we sometimes, folks will still call it Hatfield Quality Meats, and that's the brand that you'll still see in the store, Hatfield. A few years back, we changed the name to Clemens Food Group because Hatfield was not the only brand that we produced in Hatfield, Pennsylvania at the time. So I'm going to start right off with the mountains because the numbers are a lot easier to look at and go through as we talk about the business. The family is extraordinarily large. G1 was John C. Clemens, and we are now down to G7. There are 9 G7 family members. G2, I actually had the pleasure of meeting with one of the sole remaining G2 family member just this week. She's 96, still lives independently, and is just phenomenal, and just optimist and loves life. So then we get to G3, where there's 50 family members, G4, 172, G5, where there's 352 G5 family members, ranging in age from mid 50s, I would say, all the way down to 1. So this is really the generation where the ages become a lot more important than maybe the generation itself. G6, 215, and a few G7s. So now we'll get to shareholders. Shareholders, 1 remaining, G3, 37. So a lot of our G3 family members either worked in the business, had a spouse that worked in the business, and are now all retired. G4, 102, G5, 142, and you can see that G6, 94. So somebody who's a lot better at math than I am can figure out statistically. I mean, it's only going to be a handful of years before that G6 overtakes G5 in terms of number of shareholders. But that really has a lot to do more with the wealth strategy and passing down shares than anything else. So we have our management team. I'll move right over to management. This slide is actually 3 days in the future. So this slide is as of Sunday. Saturday is the end of our fiscal year. So beginning on Sunday, fiscal year 22 for us, Craig Etzel will be the CEO and is the first non-family CEO that we've had of the Clemens Family Corporation. Doug Clemens, who you mentioned, had previously been CEO, and he will remain chairman of the board. Brad Clemens, yep. This is a very big transition for us. Brad Clemens will be president of the food group, which is the most significant entity of all of the entities. We have 17 Clemens family team members who are employed full-time. There's another handful who are part-time. And we have over 3,800 team members, and these are spread in various locations. We are an integrated pork producer. So we have had a plant in Hatfield, Pennsylvania since 1946, since the Clemens family actually purchased Hatfield Packing Company. There was a smaller plant up in Emmaus. Because we are vertically coordinated, we do actually have farms. About 25% of the hogs that are coming to either plant are raised by Clemens. The other 75% are independent pork producers. And so there are team members out on farms. And then in 2017 is when we started with the Coldwater plant, which is a fresh pork plant out in Coldwater, Michigan. So that's where all of our 3,800 team members are. I'll talk a little bit about our board. We have had an independent board since 2000. So the chair is Doug Clemens, who is a family member. We have a lead director who really does a lot of the day-to-day, a lot of the coordination, and that's Charles Zimmerman. He is a non-family member. One additional family member who's actually an in-law, and then 3 other independent non-family board members. And more recently, we started with a Clemens Family Owners Board. So prior to this Clemens Family Owners Board, our board was dealing with both business issues and some family issues as well. Even as it relates to shareholder cash, shareholder wealth planning, tax strategies, and the like. And that has now really shifted to the Clemens Family Owners Board, who is responsible for both shareholder education and shareholder wealth. And so that is made up of 6 family members. One mountain that I realize that is not on there, we do have a Clemens Family Council as well. So that would relate to our red triangle, the family. They are responsible for planning our social events, and they are purely social because, as you can see, not all family members are shareholders. So that is typically we were, prior to COVID, moving to 4 events throughout the year, typically with one large picnic or, luncheon one time a year.
And Tara, I just like to pause here, kind of a moment of silence. This is very rare what the Clemens family has done. We are very fortunate to have them as part of our learning community. They worked hard at this. When I go to conferences, across the nation, there they are. I mean, they are really a best practice family and business. And again, they figured it out their way. Every family does it differently, but this is just phenomenal.
Well, thank you very much. So we can move on to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit about the history of the business and how we got to where we are today. So it was founded by John C. Clemens, but what you'll see is there actually is a Clemens Road in mainland, in tiny, tiny little mainland Pennsylvania, which is a Culpsville, Harleysville area. You may not even know that it's its own geographic area, but it really was the family farm. And that's where they started in pork production. It burned down in 1946, which was right after World War II. Supplies were short, in short supply, and they were also very expensive. Maybe not that different from today if anyone's trying to get any projects done. But the business was then purchased, by their father, or by 4 brothers. They purchased it from their father. They also then, as part of the same transaction, purchased Hatfield Packing Company, which had been in existence in Hatfield at the present day location since 1895. So what do we use as our date for how long the business has been around? Is it 1895, which was Hatfield Packing Company, which was purchased, or 1946? Sometimes we use both because it gives us an opportunity to celebrate how long the business has been owned by the Clemens family. So this year would be 75 years since that 1946 purchase. Today, there are 3 facilities: Hatfield, Emmaus, and Coldwater, Michigan. And if you've driven by the Hatfield plant recently, we are in the process of building a very large, some call it a bacon plant, smoked meats. It's going to be bacon, ham, and the like. It will be right across the street from the Hatfield, where the Hatfield facility is right now. Country View Family Farms, that is our farming operations, all hog production. PV Transport, transportation, that's both transportation of finished product and also hog hauling. Today we have just over 3,800 team members. Only 17 full-time team members are Clemens family members. There are 800 Clemens family members and 370 owners of the business. And actually, when I did this slide, 2 weeks ago, the number was actually 799 Clemens family members, but I'm willing to bet somewhere we are now officially at 800. Then another one was born somewhere. So here are Clemens family shareholders out in Coldwater, Michigan. This was in 2018 at the grand opening of the Coldwater facility. So we held our annual shareholder meeting out in Coldwater that year. And these are the Clemens family members that traveled out for the grand opening. And you can see there are many, and I'm sure we're missing about another 100 or so from this picture. And we'll get to structure, the Clemens Family Corporation. All shareholders are shareholders in the Clemens Family Corporation. There are 3 other entities underneath that. So the first is Pleasant Valley Packing, and actually Clemens Food Group falls underneath that. Country View Family Farms, PV Transport, they all fall underneath Pleasant Valley Packing. And Pleasant Valley was the name of the original farm that is on Clemens Road. It's actually right across from the the mainland golf course. So next time you're in that area, you can take a look and see where the original Pleasant Valley farm was, hence the Pleasant Valley packing name. Clemens development was started with the construction of a lot of the retail that you would see right in Hatfield along 40-foot road. So there's a large Lowe's there, ShopRite, and it now expands all the way up to a Dunkin' Donuts at one end, to the other end, which is there's a Chick-fil-A down at that end, Wawa, and now a Firestone, I think was the most recent. But there's a number of retail tenants in that area. And in addition to that, there's also a light industrial component that's not just in Hatfield. There's a number of properties within the state of Pennsylvania. And then also some of our farms are also owned by Clemens Development. And Clemens Investment is the last one there that holds some life insurance policies. And then also we've dabbled in captive insurance, and that's where it is with Clemens. It sits in Clemens Investments.
Great. Well, thank you, Tara and Nellie, for that introduction. So let's jump into some questions. I'd like to ask you both, Nellie, starting with you, talk about your path into the family business, maybe starting when you were in high school. What was your path into it? And then where are you now and who are you accountable to?
Sure. When I first started working at Lincoln 5 years ago, I realized that I was already on the system because I must have interned there when I was a teenager. And I mean, I didn't totally forget about it, but I was surprised to be on the system, the AS400, which we still use today. But this is not my first career. My first career was as a teacher. In my 20s, I taught math for grades 7 to 12. Our family does encourage G3 to maybe not start at Lincoln and maybe get something to compare it to first. And I am very, very glad I did that because teaching was a real challenge. So I don't take for granted my situation now, comfy in my house. I can get up and use the restroom whenever I want, things like that. The teachers don't get to do really. And actually a lot of my cousins are teachers. So they know that too. When I started at Lincoln, I took the Series 6, which is one of many financial exams that people at Lincoln take. I've since, and they're not easy. Maybe they're easy for somebody, but I haven't met anybody for which they are easy. I've taken the 63, the 26, and the 7, and I'm working on my 65. So that actually even helping other employees pass these exams has been one of the things that I've tried to work on. I have a second cousin, Mary Kay, who was in our HR department for a long time and trying to help people pass these difficult exams.
So you're a virtual services coordinator?
I am.
Is that right? And who are you accountable to?
My manager is Sue. Her manager is Nancy. Nancy's manager is Meralda, I believe, who is down in Florida. And then maybe Meralda's manager is Ray. And Ray's manager is my dad.
So there's no family. It's way up there. You are
right.
accountable to not a family. Okay, good.
Exactly.
Okay. How about same thing for you, Tara? Talk about your path into the business.
Sally, I know exactly what you want me to say here, and I promise I'll say it. If you had asked 10 or 20-year-old Tara, there was no path into the family business because the men worked at the plant and the girls went to college. So I went to college. I then actually went into the Peace Corps and law school after that. So I was a lawyer for 10 years in DC. I met my husband in law school. We were both lawyers in DC. And John Reininger had sent me a job announcement for an open position as corporate counsel at Clemens. And I looked at it. I thought about who, I had worked with, colleagues who I had, been working with, any other friends, and promptly passed the job announcement on to my husband and said, I can't think of anyone I know that would, want this position or really be a great fit, but he worked more in corporate law. I was, certain he knew someone. It's a great company. It's, just continuing to grow. There's so much growth opportunity. And he looked at me and said, why would you not apply for that? I said, well, we live in DC. We're lawyers in DC. This is what we do. And that summer I had moved up to my parents' house, actually, just to try it out and see if it could be a good fit. And it was truly exciting at the time. We were in the process of beginning discussions with producers out in the Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio areas for construction of the plant out in Coldwater, Michigan. And so from there, working on the construction contracts, the producer contracts, something we'll talk about a little bit later on when we talk about shareholder liquidity. At the same time, we were working on a preferred dividend offering for Generation 4 shareholders. So it really had a wonderful mix of items, which was on the legal side, the family side, and I was hooked. So we officially moved up that fall, started house hunting at that time. And I now have had several different roles in the company. And I will go ahead and talk about those, Sally, unless you have other questions.
Yes, please do.
Yep. So when I started in the legal role, I reported to Dave Budnick, who was the CFO. Dave then left the company, and there was an opening for a lot of the work that he had done on the shareholder side, which I also was, very interested in. So I took that on in about, I would say that was 2017, 2018. I'm trying to get my years straight here. And worked closely with John Reininger in developing this shareholder services office. And a lot of it was managing a lot of the stock transactions that took place each year. So some of it was just purely administrative. The more exciting side was developing shareholder education, working on shareholder meetings, and then also starting this Clemens Family Owners Board, which has taken traction. It's made up of 6 family members, and they really are handling a lot of the shareholder issues. They are now the ones developing content for shareholder meetings and the like. So in that role, I reported to either Craig Etzel or Doug Clemens. I am now moving back to a legal role, really supporting one large lawsuit that we have at the time. So I will report now to a non-family member who is both Chief Legal Officer and President of Clemens Development. His name is Tom McKernan. And he reports up to Craig Etzel, who is the first non-family CEO. So I actually have no family members right now in my reporting structure.
So you yourself are going through a lot of transition. And,
absolutely.
And which is, I think everyone on the Zoom can relate to that. And often, family businesses need to have a certain amount of flexibility, and particularly family members, which you're demonstrating.
Yes, yep, absolutely. And that transition plan for making sure that all of the various functions are either being handled by our communications team, our Clemens Family Owners Board. We have wonderful software that's now been put in place that's going to be managed by our finance department. That transition timeline actually goes through the end of June. So for a while, I still will be working with shareholders and answering questions and transitioning items as they come up.
And eating your Wheaties along the way, I'm
Yes.
sure. So now I'd like to ask you both a question that, often when people are getting new to the idea of family business, when we talk about the mountains, the shareholder mountain is always kind of like the mysterious, the invisible one. And it's often, when we say, what does it mean to be a shareholder? It's different in different companies and different stages. So I'd like to ask you each, Nellie, let's start with you. What does it mean to be a shareholder in your company? How do you become a shareholder? And then a little bit more about what are the shareholder responsibilities and benefits?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I'll start with how you become a shareholder, and that is by either being Nick and Agnes's children or grandchildren. So that's G3. So my son, who is in G4, is not a shareholder, but I could and plan to bequeath my shares to him through my will. So that's how we do it. I know every family does it differently. A lot of our G2s want to do the same thing for their grandchildren. So that might be how this situation passes to G4 and G5, like Tara's family. Let's see, our responsibilities include really emphasizing Lincoln's family culture whenever we can, which is just a focus on the family, a focus on our employees' families, on our reps and their families, and all the trials and tribulations that come along with that. The charitable arm, we focus on 501c3 charities. I think we're pretty open to any charity, but we focus on helping people directly, like with hunger or building houses or something like that, cancer research. And then we recently added protecting the environment, because that seems to be a theme in my generation. A lot of my cousins, we're tree huggers. We're proud tree huggers. So we added that. Now there is, now that we don't own 100% of the company and there is liquidity, we can choose, if we want to sell our shares or redeem our shares once a year. That's a process that my Aunt Rosemary handles. So there is a little bit more freedom in my generation than perhaps there was for G2.
So you do have a redemption policy.
Right.
So what about voting the board? How does that happen? Now you have two boards, but.
Well, yes. I mean, how did we choose Uncle Harry and Aunt Rosemary to be the liaison between Liggy, which is the G2 board, and Litch, which is the Lincoln board? I don't know the answer to that, actually. Maybe they're the only two who wanted it. I don't know.
Be a good question sometimes.
And then also on the Litch board is my dad, and I think he will remain on that board even after he retires, which is on his horizon at this point. We don't know the details, but his replacement will probably not be a family member. Right.
And how about distribution policy? Do you have a distribution policy?
We do. We are a pass-through organization, so Lincoln has to sort of distribute something like 90% of its profits to its shareholders. So the shareholders pay taxes on it, not so much Lincoln. So we get quarterly distributions to pay our quarterly estimated taxes.
Okay. And last question on this for you, spouses, are they eligible to be shareholders?
They are not. I was thinking about this earlier, whether it could be a situation like G4 where we put them in our will or something. I actually don't know the answer to that either, but we do try to distinguish that the shareholders are relatives of Nick and Agnes Forst.
So down the gene, down the bloodline.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. And how about same thing for you, Tara? How do you become a shareholder? What does it mean to be a shareholder?
Okay, absolutely. So we are born into being shareholders. So any descendant of John C. Clemens can be a shareholder. And typically the way that this has worked in the past, and I'll start with the third generation really, and that would have been my grandfather, they were the ones to set up what at the time were educational trusts for the fifth generation. The company and share prices. We are a C corporation, so we do have shares in the company. We're a lot smaller at the time. And so the thought as the third generation passed these shares down to the fifth generation was setting up a trust so that these fifth generation family members could redeem the shares to pay for college, to pay for any sort of educational expenses. The company has been so blessed and has grown extraordinarily during this time. Our family is typical in that we did not do a very good job talking about wealth from that third generation to the fifth generation. So starting with the fifth generation, all of a sudden there were these trusts that were set up to pay for college. No one really knew that there was anything else left over in these trusts at the time. And this has now progressed on for, I would say, 35 some years. So certainly the fifth generation and sixth generation. The fifth generation, we now know that we had these trusts. A lot of the trusts have expired or are expiring. We now own these shares individually. Our parents and our grandparents are now setting up trusts and passing on shares to our children. So what began as an educational benefit has now turned into a passing down wealth and company sustainability and wealth strategy, which is pass the shares down to the lowest the lowest generation that you can, and that's how we're managing it today. So moving on to what we'll call our financial benefits of ownership. Now that we have these fifth generation family members, such as myself, we really had to define what are these shares? What do they mean? As the fifth generation family members started to get married, and all of a sudden you have to explain to a spouse who knows nothing about this, what is this? What are these shares? We're trying to make it as simple as possible, which is there are financial benefits of ownership associated with the shares. So you can redeem shares to pay for any educational expenses. You can redeem shares one time for the first time. It started out as first time purchase of a home that has changed a little bit in that now we have some older family generation members who are using it to buy into retirement communities. So it has morphed somewhat, but we will, there's a set limit on the number of shares that you can redeem towards that. And now later in life, as we talk about liquidity, we have preferred shares, and we are now actually all the way up to preferred I. We started with A.
Whoa.
You can see that we do like preferred shares. They have served their purpose. They work well. Now, who knows if that's going to continue into the future. These preferred shares were set up to provide additional income in retirement so that you can take your non-voting common shares, which could appreciate or depreciate. They certainly have done a lot more appreciating, and convert them to a preferred share, which does not grow. It is a fixed price that pays a much more significant dividend. So you can use that as a supplement to retirement income. So those are our preferred shares.
Well, and same to you. Do you have, so the distribution policy, do you also have a distribution policy?
So we have a distribution policy as well. That is in flux at the moment. We do have dividends are paid out twice a year. So the preferred dividends, I've already spoken to a little bit. That is by far the most significant dividend. That's the most significant company obligation, is paying out those preferred dividends. And in fact, that is multiples of the housing redemption and both educational redemption combined. We also pay a non-voting common dividend, which traditionally had been a set number, a very low set number. I think it's like a 0.1% of a share value, which really reflects the distribution policy, reflecting family values and our core values, which is we'll help you out in the beginning stages. We'll help you out with education. We'll help you out with the first time purchase of a home. We'll help you out in retirement. But that time in between, you really are on your own. So you are expected to go out and work and find your way in the world. And, we'll help you out. We'll be the bookends. But everything else that you're responsible for. The company has had an extraordinary year. As the fifth generation, we have so many passive owners now. We are paying a special dividend for the first time actually in the company's history, just this week, based on the extraordinary year that we ended up having at the end of the day.
Sharing the goodness around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And so it is this fiscal year, since it will be paid out in this fiscal year, we paid, this is the first time we've really ever had a variable dividend. And so the first one was in July of last year, when there was virtually no dividend paid because of, the uncertainty with COVID. And now it's, paying it forward to shareholders.
Mm-hmm. And Nellie talked a little bit about their Lincoln Cares. A little bit about, I know you're a key value of yours is generosity, as it is with many of our members. Yep. Talk a little bit about how you express that.
Yep. So the company's core values are ethics, integrity, and stewardship. And the stewardship piece is very important, both at the company level and the family level. So at the company level, because it's food production, I want to say it's pretty easy to be charitable in the food arena. And that's where the company tends to focus, are in food related, I would say food related charities. A significant portion of giving generally is actually done by shareholders. And so this is done through the donation of stock. The company then redeems those shares. So it is company cash that's going out the door, but that really is shareholder driven. So it allows shareholders to donate at an individual level and with organizations that they feel very passionately about. So we have about 45 shareholders who participate each year in this charitable giving. And a lot of it is to organizations that are local to them, certainly to local churches, lots of mission work. And then again, anything else that is really in shareholders' hearts and minds.
Well, and how can the shareholders express their voice? Like how do you vote the board? Okay, so we have 4 voting trusts that hold all of the voting shares of the company, and they vote in the board of directors each year. Those voting trusts are made up by third generation trusts that all get together and they vote their voting trustee. So this year is actually one of our voting trustees are voted in every 5 years. And this year is a big vote for us. When we talk about corporate documents and the Cousin Consortium, this is a great example of where our documents tell us exactly what we are supposed to be doing. We've done it in practice, but we are now making a transition from third generation voting trustees to fourth generation voting trustees.
So now we actually read our corporate documents and we looked at the process, and it's a great one. It's a wonderful one that really can be translated to the fourth and fifth generations to tell them, look, this is going to be your responsibility moving forward. Fourth and fifth generation family members, here's how you are going to have to get together moving forward to, one, vote for your family representative at the third generation level. And third generation family representatives, you then get together and are going to vote for your voting trustee. My family branch is by far the most complex. We will have 6 family unit representatives who will be voting for one voting trustee. And we will be transitioning from the third generation to the fourth. And of those 6 votes, we've had 3 third generation family members pass away. So this really is going to be all about the fourth and the fourth in our family. We're the oldest of the branches, meaning that our John S. Clemens, that's our branch. So we really will be the first family branch going through this. So we will see this summer. It's going to be exciting.
Just lots of transition. Yeah. So you stay in kind of the family branches.
We do for the vote, yes.
For the vote.
We try to avoid family branchism in every other item. This is the one where, and really for sustainability purposes, it does make so much sense to have these voting shares in voting trusts. But this is the one area where we continue to have branchism.
Gotcha. So a little bit about redemption. Can shareholders redeem?
So shareholders can redeem for education and for housing. Right now, we have had personal redemptions in the past. Because of the year that we had this year, we did have personal redemptions this year. We actually did not have any last year because of COVID, and we didn't have any the year prior to that because of international trade and what was going on with tariffs. And the uncertainty there. And so I think moving forward, to the extent that we do have personal redemptions, they will look very similar to how they looked this year, which is when the company has an extraordinary year, shareholders may be able to submit redemption requests.
Juan, tell us a little bit, Tara, how you deal with spouses. Can spouses be shareholders?
Yep, spouses can be shareholders. And what probably started as something that was done for tax reasons now has become a more emotional one for shareholders, in that you can almost follow tax policy as to how folks own shares. So prior to there being portability, being, a husband and a wife allowing to, they could split they could combine their federal exemptions. Prior to that, shares were given to, both spouses, or one spouse would start giving shares to another spouse so that they were more evened out because there was no portability. Now spouses have can combine their federal exemptions. There really isn't a need for it. So now, to the extent spouses are shareholders, it really is more of an emotional decision, and we do still allow spouses to be shareholders, and it is a very exciting day for them when they are gifted shares.
I can imagine. Well, I want to ask you both about, you're both in large shareholder teams. Natalie, I think 24, and I forget your number, 700 and whatever number that was, Tara. But as shareholder teams get larger, there's an increasing concern around feelings like entitlement or dependency, lack of engagement. So, how do you work at this? How do you educate family members, shareholders, because they're really family shareholders, are pretty much the same for both of you. How do you do the education, and how do you work at some of those natural challenges? Natalie, why don't you take this one first?
It's a really good question. At the cousin level, it can be a choice. We do have those shareholder meetings twice a year. and we do strongly encourage attendance, but if someone doesn't want to go, they don't have to go. The more knowledge, the better. I think we would all agree, the more knowledge, the better, but you can't make people care more than they actually care. In my family, we care. So it hasn't really been an issue, but in encouraging people to start their careers elsewhere, you know, careers are busy, you know, and if they stick with that career, there's not as much time for Lincoln as somebody like me who chose to join in my second career. We have to start talking about G4, our oldest G4, Sienna. I think she's 14. So it is definitely time for us to start educating them. I actually feel bad. I asked Alex to stay upstairs while I was doing this, but he's 11 and maybe he could benefit from this recording. So that's how we do it. It's very important, and it's a focus of Del Val for very good reasons. Yeah. I wanted to mention that some of the things that Tara said sparked thoughts of mine. Like, for instance, you know, my money was in trust too until I was 35, I believe. Somewhere between 35 and 40, I actually gained control of my shares. And I'm so thankful for that, because it would not have been in good hands in my 20s. And then when Tara was talking about college and first houses, I remember when I was about college age, I went to Drexel. And around that time, I asked my dad, what is this money for? And he said, college and houses. And we would probably add, you know, taking care of your children when you have children. Some of my cousins have redeemed shares to start businesses, restaurants, things like that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Tara, same question for you.
Okay. You had mentioned it's an increasing concern. I would say we are at the point right now with our shareholders, it is our number one concern. Because we have a huge shareholder base, so many family members live all across the country now. While the bulk, believe it or not, are still in Pennsylvania. And we're at a point now where maybe the fourth generation family members did not work in the business, or as we transitioned from a family business to business family in 2000, maybe that fourth generation family member was asked to leave the business. So our fifth generation family members, there's a lot of work to be done. I'm going to ask you to pull up our shareholder mission slide if you can. So what we did about 5 years ago now is we had all of our, it's the next slide. It's the shareholder mission. We got all of our shareholders together as part of a shareholder meeting and asked shareholders to come up with what they believe it means to be a shareholder and what their responsibilities are. Lots of flip charts were involved. We took all of the flip chart pages at the end of the day and combined those into 3 core areas, which are legacy, embrace the company's mission and core values, participation, be informed, educated, and active, and sustainability, be good stewards. So each time that we have a shareholder meeting and we have an opportunity to talk about shareholder education, we will focus on, sometimes it is just one piece of this. We had a whole annual meeting about being good stewards and what that means. We've talked about, what it means to be active in participation. So we really moving forward, we're going to be linking all of our shareholder education to these 3 areas. And that was something that it helped us define what the shareholder mission is, and then also really set a platform for education moving forward.
Is really good, Tara. I mean, I think this stewardship, having that stewardship mentality and that active and engaged, how do we continue to infiltrate that through the generations.
Yeah.
So anything else that you're doing? I mean, I'll just ask you, tell us a little bit about some of the surveys you're doing. I think that's a really a good tool that you're using in a good way.
Yep. So we actually started at the company level with team members and and team member engagement. And so this really engagement, has become so much more of a focus in the past few years. So we looked at team member engagement and crafted our own survey for shareholder engagement. And unlike team member engagement, which is an annual survey, shareholder engagement really is looking in like 5-year chunks, maybe eventually generational chunks of time. So it's a much larger time frame. But we looked at shareholder engagement, what makes them feel the most engaged to the business. And so we learned a few things from that. One, they really like still hearing about the business. And so quarterly updates, and it's not just the financial piece, it's who are our customers? What are team members doing? For those who worked at the company, we have a number of team members who are retiring this year who know family members. Family members love that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. They love interactions with team members. So that's one thing that we learned. The communication piece is really important to shareholders, making them proud. What makes them proud to be a shareholder? So some of it is the charitable piece, their ability that the company is redeeming shares and that the company is also has its own charitable efforts, and they really enjoy hearing about care of team members. So those are some things that we have learned about shareholders through shareholder engagement. This first shareholder engagement survey that we did, those are really the areas that make shareholders feel engaged.
And that's so important. I know in my experience, if you're either a passive shareholder, or if you're not working in the business, you tend to feel like outies, like maybe I'm not even part of the family. Yeah. So anything we can do to bring family members in, this is all part of, the larger legacy.
Yep. And one other thing that Nellie mentioned that I thought it's very true, and it showed in our shareholder engagement survey, was that people do have lives outside of the company, and we both work in the business, so this is a lot of our time. But one thing that we learned is that shareholders believe that they are a lot more active in participating in meetings and things like that than they actually are. So to the extent that they are, reading something or educating themselves, they consider that participation, even if they don't go to the meeting about the same topic. So they may not be coming to every annual meeting. They may make one every 3 years, but they would still consider themselves actively participating.
Well, I know the Berge families they're on this webinar. I know they're doing some important things too around communication through the platform of Trusted Family, where members can all share documents, photos, videos. It's very confidential, so you can have the board separate from the shareholder, from family council. So there's lots of really good tools out there as well. Well, Tara, did you also want to share a little bit about the slide, your other slide?
Sure, we can talk about that too. Yep, if you want to bring that up. We call that our trust triangle, and that's really how we try to keep a focus on the three parts of the triangle. So we have our board of directors up top. Actually, I'll start with our Clemens family owners. So this would be both our voting trustees and our Clemens family owners board. They really set the stage. They set the family goals, and they are then communicated up to the board of directors, who have the fiduciary responsibility. They are responsible for holding management accountable to make sure that the family goals are met. And I heard this once, and I think it is very true, that the family really has influence, but not necessarily control over the company. So the family is voting in the board of directors. It's the board of directors that are holding management accountable for meeting these family goals. And finally, you have management, who is taking, they are implementing everything that needs to be implemented. They are the day-to-day running the company, and they are implementing both strategy at the corporate level, but then also, accountable to the board of directors for running the company. And they really are the ones who are managing the family asset.
Thank you, Tara. Now, I'd like to ask you both kind of a personal question that you can choose to answer or not. Both of your families, I think, really have incredible strengths, but also some incredible challenges that would have fragmented most families. And actually, that's true for most of the families we work with and who are on this Zoom call. But do you want to make any comments about that, either about the strengths or the challenges, or how you push through?
That's a really great question. And for my family, that goes back to our focus on mental health and recovery, because sometimes those issues are hereditary. So my family has faced the challenge of addiction. And I feel like my generation has really made progress in that area. And I've noticed their emphasis on being open about it and sort of removing the shame and realizing that it's a very common problem. And we can help more if we're open and honest than if we try to hide it behind a closet door somewhere.
And in fact, I've been to some conferences where they said that often addictions are run stronger and more prevalent in family businesses, could be because of some of the challenges as well. And so you have found some really good resources, and actually you brought one of them into our women's group.
That's right. I brought Caron in. My family works with Caron. They are a recovery center based in our area in Pennsylvania. They also are affiliated with a group in Florida. So they're a very well-established organization that has helped my family in the past. So I brought in a woman from Caron to speak to our women's group. It was an outdoor event, which thank you, COVID, for getting me outdoors more. But that's about all the thank yous COVID will get from me. It was a great event. The other women really appreciated it. I think some of them really had current issues for which that probably helped. And yeah.
And so I would name as some of your family strengths, the courage and vulnerability to really step in into some incredibly difficult issues.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Tara, any comments on your part around strengths or challenges?
Yep. So I know that those who have heard folks from Clemens speak before have heard about this transition that we had from family business to business family in 2000. And a lot of that, it continues to surface even today with shareholders. And so that was a time where a number of family members were asked to leave the business because at the end of the day, when you look at their job descriptions and the qualifications that they would have had if it not been a family-owned company, frankly, they didn't meet those job qualifications. That set into motion a lot of great things that we can see today, such as a family employment policy, but that really was a very rough time. I was certainly on the outskirts at the time, but in my job in shareholder services, I saw it, and I see issues surface from time to time, or some resentment. And the other part of it is within that fourth generation, I don't want to. There are some family members who still harbor resentment at that fourth generation family level. I even see it sometimes in my immediate family. The good news is that we really were protected from it. So we didn't see, as fifth generation family members, we heard little snippets, but we weren't living it. It was the fourth generation family members who were really living it. So I have a lot of hope in the fifth generation that we can overcome some of the obstacles that our parents had. On a very personal level, I mean, I can tell you that my mom and her siblings, they have a tough time talking to one another for a number of reasons, but our fifth generation, our cousins, we probably would not be friends outside of being family members. But we all grew up going to my grandparents' house for Sunday dinner, and we actually have a great relationship. We could not be more different. But we have learned to talk to one another, talk through differences. We disagree with one another on a lot of things, but we've learned to work through it. That's not to say we're perfect. That's not to say we're a model, but it's certainly the family business that has really forced us to communicate with one another, with folks who maybe we otherwise would not be communicating with.
Wow. And you also mentioned the family dinner, family dinners, Sunday dinner, shared faith, all of these things that help us to, get through a lot of the complexities. So, and you also talked about the, you kind of had that slippery slope like many of our other families in the beginning, right? Everyone just kind of, all the guys go into the business and the women kind of are invisible or don't count, we're
Except for the women got the college education, and
Yes.
I think that might have been, the way to go.
There you go. Well, we have just a few minutes. Well, one question that came up, and just another question I would have. So prenups, do you have prenups in your system, your family? Do you require them?
We do not require them. We strongly encourage them.
Okay. Sarah?
Very similar. They are they're strongly encouraged. We need to do a lot more on that front. We absolutely do. They are not required.
Thank you. And then the last one, just if you have a minute, in any counsel that you would like to pass on to those watching or listening, any counsel or encouragement?
So the one piece of advice that I would give is that you cannot communicate enough. Continue to communicate and communicate and communicate. And in a family as large as ours, we always have a meeting after the meeting. And if somebody has a question, they will ask their parents first, and the parents then ask the grandparents. So being open and transparent about everything. I think you began by saying the shareholders tend to be so secretive. Who are these owners? But within the shareholder base, there's no reason for it to be secretive. Transparency and communication is key, because frankly, at the end of the day, you don't know what the relationship is in between all of these within the family branches. So when shareholders have a question, you want them to feel comfortable coming to the company. You want everyone to be getting the same answer across the board. And I really think that helps make shareholder communication and just shareholder responsibilities easier moving forward.
Well, can I ask you about that when you say the meeting after the meeting? Because in our behavioral covenants that we often encourage families to adopt, we say, we're not going to have the meeting after the meeting. Bring all your questions here. Don't go out in the parking lot and then say, well, why didn't we talk about this? So just another word about that. What do you mean? The meeting?
We actually, there was one meeting we had recently where we assigned some of our family board members to figure out what the questions were in the meeting after the meeting.
Okay.
The next meeting after that, we were able to address some of those questions. Believe it or not, one of the things that really has been beneficial about COVID is that we've recorded our business information sessions and educational sessions, and we send them out as video links. We've had more shareholders watch them because they can watch them on their own time. And we then allow them to send in questions, and we will then respond to those questions. That really has helped diffuse, because certainly there are no in-person meetings, but it really has allowed us to address all of the questions at one time and in one setting and for all shareholders to hear. And I think it's a format that we'll probably use moving forward.
That's excellent. And I know I've been encouraging that as well. Good to hear that. Nellie, advice, counsel.
I agree with everything Tara said, and I would just add that soliciting outside advice, it has been very beneficial for us. Del Val, we've had mediators like Brian Middleton. We know that we don't need to do all this ourselves or reinvent the wheel, and that's made us stronger.
Well, thank you very much, Nellie and Tara, for sharing with us. Really appreciate that. And I just want to bring up another slide, Shari, if you could pull a slide up. There's some reflections that I would encourage you all who are listening in to ask your family, reflect within yourself. What ownership form are you currently in on your shareholder mountain? What does it mean to be a shareholder in your family business? And by the way, does everyone know that? What would your family say? What would management say? What's the clarity that we need about being shareholders? And then what is the next step you will take or try to influence to further develop or upgrade your shareholder mountain? So we're going to continue the learning. We have 3 events in May. May 4th, it's here comes the PRO Act, implications for family. We're going to hear from Bob Nagel on May 4. And then May 12, we're going to hear from Andrew and Steve on considerations when pursuing an acquisition as part of your family business growth strategy. And then May 29, we're going to be focusing on the board mountain with Dave and Julie. And then the management mountain on June 22 with Brandon from LTI and Jim Smucker from Kime. And then the advisor mountain in September. So thank you all for joining us today. I wish you many blessings on your day, your week, and stay well, everyone. Thanks again, Nellie and Tara.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.